As a guitar teacher, I almost always find that rhythm and phrasing are bigger obstacles than the notes or chords themselves. You know, syncopation and note duration is such an afterthought. Everyone jumps online to find the tabs to see where to put their fingers, but nobody seems to care whether those tabs contain the correct rhythmic notation, or indeed any rhythmic information at all. The problem with this is, unless you can use your ear or your memory to play the rhythm correctly, things just aren't going to sound right. You might find that you can't really play along very successfully with the original recording, or you might think the tabs are wrong. They probably are. Or you might just find the whole exercise depressing and feel like a bit of a failure. But you know, just like most rock music is built from the same few chord patterns and shapes and groups of notes, similarly, there are a fairly small number of rhythmic phrases that are terrifically prevalent throughout the music that you love. I mean, I'm not talking about Zappa and Animals as leaders here. So I'm going to teach you a few of the most common ones by showing you where they occur in some very well-known songs. So thumb one in softly down below and let's get on with this. Let's start simple so that you know how this is going to work. Here's a musical phrase. Now, I'm not here to teach you how to read music. This video will help you whether you read music or you don't. Here's a musical phrase, an eighth note, an eighth note, and a quarter note. And here's what it sounds like. Simple, right? So you see that, you hear that, you just remember it, like this picture means this sound. It's the same as we do with chord shapes. When you're first learning chords and you look at that box, it's a C chord and you've got to go 1, 2, 3. Well, you don't do that forever. You soon remember that, and you remember that as a shape. You just see the picture, and after a while you don't need the picture, you just need the name. You just see C and you play a C chord. So that's what we need to do. We need to apply that to rhythm and syncopation as well. So let's try a few others. An eighth note, then 2 16th notes. Now an eighth note is half a beat. So if we're counting 1, 2, 3, we count 1 and 2 and 3. So we're cutting a beat in half. Now a 16th note is cutting it into quarters. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a little groups of 4. So an eighth note followed by 2 16th notes. What does that sound like? Well, hang on. Da da da, da da da. Yeah, barracuda. Da 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 da. What about 2 eighth notes followed by 2 16th notes? 1 and 2 E. I wonder if that's in any common song. Bum bum ba ba da 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 da. 1 and 2 E. There you go. You see that? You remember that? So the whole idea here is to build up a little memory bank of common phrases where you hear a super common song in your head so that you're not stuck labouring over a phrase that you think is new when it's actually something that you've known forever. So what about a 16th note followed by an 8th note? So like 1 E, da da. So if we put a couple of those together, if we repeated that, da 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 da, I wonder if that's a common phrase. So in that Led Zeppelin example, that phrase is beginning halfway between beats 3 and 4, if we were to count that in. 1, 2, 3, 1. But what if we were to move that so that it was on beat 1, that ba 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 ba. Well, Green Acres. Who would have thought those two songs have the exact same phrase? Da 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 da. If you put it into 5/8. Alright, let's move on to triplets. Triplets are a simple idea. We just squish 3 notes in the space where there's only supposed to be 2. Standard 8th notes, 1 and 2 and 3. We just change that to 1 and a, 2 and a, 3 and a. So they're the simple triplets. Where I find they get a little bit tricky, and especially tricky to read, is where we've got quarter note triplets. So instead of having 1, 2, we've got 1, 2, 3, squashed into the same place, drifting across those beats of the bar. So that might sound tricky, but we hear it all the time. And it's a great exercise to learn how to tap out those polyrhythms. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I saw a really handy thing in a book many years ago to describe how to learn that sort of pattern on a guitar, how to learn 2/3. And it was saying, play the guitar, play the guitar, play the guitar. So play and get, play, get, play, get. And this is play the tar, play the tar, play the guitar, play the guitar. Sounds a bit weird, but it works. So to apply that to what we're doing here, what's a really well-known song that contains quarter note triplets? Well, there's this banger. So the triplet is 1, 2, play the guitar. Another great example that you might know is The Doors' Love Me 2 Times, Babe. So the song's beat is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Another one is I Want to Hold Your Hand at the very end. I don't even know what key it's in. I want to hold your hand. So those are triplets there. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And another classic is the Cure's riff from Boys Don't Cry. So that last ba 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 ba, that's triplets. Okay, dotted quarter notes. Now, as I said, you don't have to read music to get a huge benefit out of this lesson, but for those of you that do read music or try to, you'll know what I mean when you say you're learning and you think you're doing okay, and then you're confronted with a piece of music with dots throughout, and man, it always hurts my brain. It's simple maths. A dot increases a note's value by half again of what it already was. So if a note goes for one beat, like a quarter note, you put a dot after it, now it goes for a beat and a half. Well, that sounds simple enough. But that means when you're counting, the note on beat 1 now also encompasses part of beat 2. Yeah, I know, it's confusing. But let's apply this same idea. So a really simple example is she going out with him? Or is that steady as she goes? Steady as she goes. No. Another one would be the pre-chorus for Time After Time, Cyndi Lauper's classic. You say go slow. So that's the same thing. Ba, ba, 1, 2, and. Another more rocky outing would be the rhythm part for Come Out and Play. And if we put it in a shuffle setting, what about if we had a dotted quarter note followed by 2 16th notes? So it'd be like da, 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 if we made that a repetitive pattern. Yeah, da, 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 da. There you go, another simple one. Let's move on to dotted eighth notes. If dotted quarter notes are confusing, dotted eighth notes really do my head in, because a dotted eighth note means it goes for 3/4 of one beat. So if you put a couple in a row, it's easy to get lost. But here's a fantastic example. All right, Oh What a Night, December 63. Da, da, da. Da, da. Now by putting that on the end, da, da, that's what's known as a clave rhythm, and it's hugely common throughout all music. It was originally an African rhythmic device, but it became hugely popular in Latin music, and it's all through Western music. Famously commandeered by Bo Diddley in the 50s. I'm sure it sounds like countless different songs to you right now. Could be New York Groove by Ace Frehley, Desire by U2, Not Fade Away, Faith by George Michael, I Want Candy, or more recently, Don't Start Now. Now if we just take the first part of that pattern, so instead of ba, 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 if we go ba, 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 just repeat that. This has been done to death in American pop in recent years by the likes of Bieber, you gotta go and get angry at all of my honesty, Drake, Sheeran, and of course Shawn Mendes. But it's always been present in less obviously culturally appropriated music. What about this? It's also here. Same pattern. And if we move that pattern after beat 1, 3, 4. Life is a highway, I wanna ride. Same thing again. Now this particular phrase can be really tricky because of its close similarity to those quarter note triplets. So we had those which are like ba 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 ba, and these are like ba 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 ba. So close. And in fact, you know, in some songs you could almost interchange them, like that Eye of the Tiger. So you probably couldn't tell, but that time I was thinking triplets instead of that dotted eighth note half clave thingy. But we only have to play something like that Credence banger to hear the difference. If I play it as triplets, now the right way, it's a world of difference. Now we can cut that phrase back by even another note so that we're only left with the first dotted eighth note. Ba, 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 ba. So we've gone from ba, 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 ba. We halved it. Ba, 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 ba. Now we'll take it to two notes. Ba, 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 ba. And that's present in For All the Times That You Rain on My Parade. But the funny thing is, if we play a note on beat 2 directly after that, we lose any hint of Latin influence. So we go from ba 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 to ba 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 ba. All of a sudden it sounds super white. Like Come On Eileen. Or yeah, that's the same thing. Da da da. You know, in fact, that's got all the elements of the whole clave in it. Dun, 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 dun. Nothing's original. Everything's stolen, right? And if we just go back to Come On Eileen, if you think about that, bum, ba bum, bum, ba bum, all I've got to change is where I clap to make it a double time beat. And what have we got? Bum, ba bum, bum, ba bum, bum, ba bum. It's not unusual, Tom Jones. Rhythmic anticipation is what we call it when the main notes in a phrase appear before the main beats in the bar. My favourite example of this is TNT by AC/DC, which you might write off as a super simple riff. But the only time we play the one is the very first time. Every other time it's anticipated, it's moved back a half a beat. So 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. I'll do that slower. 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. All of the main parts of that phrase in that song are anticipated. They're played before the beat. Another great example of this is Beat It by Michael Jackson. And one, and one. A similar rhythmic device is the pickup note or the anacrusis, which is a note or a couple of notes that appear before the start of the song. It's like a prequel. So many songs and riffs and melodies begin with an eighth note before the first bar. And a great way of remembering how this sounds is the old Pink Panther theme. 1, 2, 3, 4. See, we've got that and before beat 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 1, 2, and 3, 4. And 1, and 2, and 3. You know, a guy that taught me a hell of a lot about guitar and music and theory and music reading when I was a kid, John Crozier, absolute beautiful man, legend, hero of mine. He told me a funny story about trying to teach these ideas to an elderly Italian guy that he was teaching back in the day. And he was teaching him, you know, we got to count 1, 2, 3, 4 and come in on 1. And the guy would say, okay, let's go. And a 1. And John said, no. We're just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we'll come in together. Ah, okay. And a 1. I love it. All right, another one. One for the Aussies watching. 1, 2, 3, 4. What are you doing? Earlier we had all those examples of where we were playing on the the third 16th note of a beat, like 1 and But sometimes a phrase calls for us to play an isolated note or chord on the first 16th note after the beat. Here's a couple of examples so that you know how that's supposed to sound. Yeah, so that's 1 and 2, 3 and 4, E. So it's the first 16th note after beat 4. Another great Aussie example of this one. Evie, 1, 2. So that riff comes in on the E after beat 2. 1, 2, E and R. Offbeats are the other thing that we hear all throughout our westernised forms of music, particularly in reggae. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All those strums on those offbeats or upbeats. But what we often see in phrasing is a phrase that has a couple of onbeats or downbeats and then a couple of upbeats or offbeats, like the old ba 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 baran. So that's ba 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 baran. So downbeats, down, 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 up, 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 down. Same pattern in You Can't Hurry Love, Iggy Pop's Lust for Life, Jet, Are You Gonna Be My Girl, Stones, Sympathy for the Devil.
Pleased to meet you.
So all of those are identical, but interestingly, so is this. It's just played at half speed. Ba 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 baran. Exactly the same. A slightly different version of this is heard in Up Around the Bend by Creedence. Down, down, up, up, down, up, which is probably your favourite strumming pattern. Now we could do this all night long, but I'm sure you get the point by now. So here's my lessons. Pay attention to the phrasing and relate the phrase you're trying to learn to a phrase that you already know, because chances are it's already out there. You've already played it 1,000 times. You've heard it 1 billion times. See you next week. Don't forget to check out my Patreon. There's lots of lessons and all my tabs for all of my lessons are over there. And consider subscribing. You know, there's a thing called Super Like now if you just want to support me real quick like that rather than sign up on Patreon. Love you guts.